Greetings. My name is Luke Jackson and I'm a postgraduate student at Charles Darwin University completing my final placement for my teaching degree. The following presentation outlines my personal development over 3 placements at different schools in central Queensland. This presentation includes examples of inclusive teaching practices from my placement classrooms, and also includes evidence of how I have met or have started to meet the Australian Professional Standards for Graduate Teachers from AITSL. Please note that this presentation is not a full student-teacher portfolio. Most of the examples and evidence presented come from my 3rd placement. Let's start now by defining inclusive teaching practices and then move on to the AITSL standards. Inclusive education involves embracing human diversity and welcoming all students and adults as equal members of an educational community. The best example of inclusion in my 3rd placement was a young Aboriginal student who was very introverted. I found that by making him feel included within the classroom, by providing extra scaffolding and support to him through all of our lessons, that his achievement and his participation in the classroom exceeded far beyond what he was doing beforehand. Educational exclusion may include physical or academic barriers to the successful participation and development of students within an educational institution. Such barriers may be a consequence of racial prejudice, differing societal status, physical or mental disabilities, and so forth. Nominalisation is a principle that endorses a child's individual right to attend any school, regardless of disability or inability, and to receive an equal education. It was my goal during my 3rd placement to try to apply inclusive education into my classroom practices and assess my conformance against these AITSL standards of professional knowledge, professional practice, and professional engagement. Standard 1 of AITSL is knowing my students and how they learn. While incorporating inclusive teaching, I need to understand and consider student background, educational abilities, physical, intellectual, and emotional disabilities, social issues within the school environment or at home, racial background, cultural background, and ethnic background. Much of this information was provided by my mentor teacher prior to and throughout my placement, as well as my own observations that I discussed with my mentor teacher. I had to think about all these complex issues while planning lessons and including differentiation or scaffolding, conducting lessons, interacting with students throughout the school day, interacting with teachers and other staff, and in communication with parents or caregivers. Unit outlines that I prepared or viewed would be checked for lesson progression, content suitability, intellectual differentiation for higher and lower student abilities, and possible third-party content issues, for example, ITC compatibility and suitability. Lessons would be prepared to meet the requirements of the Australian curriculum and also the term plan which was prepared by my mentor, but also with the school pedagogy of explicit instruction. Lessons were also planned to cater for the intellectual engagement of all students and allow for moments of free thought and innovation. This was provisioned through differentiation and scaffolding in English persuasive writing tasks, science experiments including the development of electrical circuits, and for the building of functional electrical circuits with clip circuit kits, geography and the completion of individual data collection and research tasks on trade link with Asia, and finally through extracurricular activities such as the first Lego League, where teams complete 5 group challenges based on annual robotic and research presentation activities. Standard 2 of AITSL requires teachers to know their lesson content and understand how to teach it. This was the second most important reflection and improvement area throughout my 3rd placement. I received continual feedback from my mentor on lesson content and my explicit instruction processes through my placement. all of which was used for my personal improvement through all of my following lessons. My mentor teacher facilitated a mentor, teacher and uni student meeting around explicit instruction practices. This included provision of practice notes that I referred to during lesson planning activities. I also used those notes for the use in rapid recall activities, tune-in activities, check for understanding activities, and also exit slip activities ending each lesson. Lessons were planned and sequenced using C2C unit outlines or from assessment-based achievement outcomes. I was able to complete lesson planning and inclusive or differentiated teaching for the following: English lessons on persuasive essays, science lessons for the study of electricity and different forms of energy, math lessons for the representation of primary and secondary data in tables and graphs, math lessons for the calculation of perimeter and area of various regular and irregular shapes, economic lessons for the use of resources as goods or services, and their effects on people, community, and the environment, and lastly, geography lessons for the study of trade links between Australia and Asia. Standard 3 of AITSL includes behaviour and classroom management practices. This was the most important area of reflection and improvement throughout my third placement. I came to realise that without good behaviour and classroom management, completion of everything else in my classroom is extremely difficult. I was set daily challenges by my mentor with regard to the following: setting classroom expectations of behaviour and lesson goals, differentiating work to all students, using verbal and non-verbal communication, and the controlling the use of my own language for the provision of direct instruction to students. I found the use of consequence and threat difficult to apply in daily classroom activities. I seemed at times conflicted between the opportunity to get work completed versus the loss of time for a student needing to go to a buddy class or possibly for a chat to the principal. I did learn some different strategies throughout this placement that will assist my classroom management strategies in the future. These were: to set expectations of behaviour clearly to my students, set consequences and get agreement from my students about those consequences, stick to those consequences, use defined and repeatable consequence measures such as gold, green, yellow and red warnings, separate trouble students, use verbal and non-verbal control techniques, and use a standard control action such as clapping, tapping a duster on a hard surface or something else to get distracted students' attention and focused on me. Engaging parents as an active participant in their child's education is also extremely important. This may occur through parent-teacher meetings, emails, and or phone communication. Inclusive teaching is foundational to Standard 4 for supportive and safe learning environments. Differentiation and classroom management is crucial for supportive and safe learning. Lesson planning templates included consideration of safe workspaces inside and outside the classroom, and I made sure that I considered that for all my activities. This also included the use of ITC and web-based programs, all of which I personally checked prior to the use of in my science and geography lessons prior to students completing research or online tasks. Student policy dictates the reporting of incidents relating to physical and mental health of students. On my third placement, I had to report to my mentor teacher and subsequently the principal an incident regarding a student who confided personal issues at home and with family members that were both upsetting to the student and of serious possible legal consequences. Student confidentiality and safety are of paramount importance throughout such issues. Assessment of student learning and the provision of feedback was a daily routine during lesson activities, rapid recall activities, tune-ins, and check for understanding activities at the end of lessons. I completed formative feedback on students' science, geography, math, and English tasks and workbook activities. I participated in teacher moderation for summative science and economic assessments that will contribute to the students' final report cards. I completed an assessment model response paper to assist with consistent marking of science tests that will also contribute to the students' final report cards. I saw how teachers collect data on student achievement levels and prepare differentiated learning strategies for individual students. I understood how this data collection was used both for moderation processes but also to help students meet their achievement standard levels needed for graduation or progression onto higher learning tasks. This included the use of iSmart assessment and NAPLAN assessment data. Every placement I have learnt more about myself, my pedagogy, teaching strategies, behaviour management, inclusive lessons, safe and supportive learning, differentiation, and in Placement 3, explicit instruction and cooperation between staff and teachers. I recognised my need for further development in behaviour management before my third placement. This was in the preparation of a research paper for my university course, and the paper was titled Teacher Fatigue and Behaviour Management. This assignment helped me recognise I needed better techniques to help my classroom and I function with the energy and enthusiasm that I will need for my students to work in the best learning environment possible. Throughout this placement, and as discussed in Standard 3 earlier, I have learnt new behaviour techniques that I will need to continually practice and hone so they become second nature to me in my classrooms in the future. Throughout all placements, I have engaged with students to build relationships as their teacher, complied with school policy, state and national legislation, and engaged formally and informally with parents about school activities and student progress or behaviour. I've also consulted with fellow teachers about best practice strategies that I hope to adopt and amend to suit my own techniques. My mentor teacher in Placement 3 provided feedback on several lessons and classroom activities through formal documentation. This was very much appreciated. My journey is not yet finished. I must keep working hard to become the best teacher I possibly can be. Inclusion for students must also incorporate inclusion for working with fellow teachers, inclusion of new ideas and technology into daily practices, and inclusion of the mistakes I know I will eventually make and what I will learn through those mistakes. Thank you for helping me through my journey so far, and thank you for listening.